What do you think, Trey? You ready to go for it?
Let's do it.
So this, I mean, now it feels like a million weeks ago, but this has been a really eventful week, right?
I don't know, man. I don't know what day it is. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure since we talked on Closing Bell last, we've got a president-elect and we've got a 90% effective vaccine. I think those are both
Yeah,
news
that's
since
true.
last Friday,
Yeah, you're right.
which seem like news.
Well, and at the same time, we've seen record numbers of COVID cases
Oh yeah,
across
I
the
just
country.
looked. I pulled it up. We've
Um,
got today is 163,000. So everything's fine.
yeah. And probably even more importantly, my fantasy football team is now the unequivocal number one fantasy football team in our league. So
Mine's up
um,
there somewhere. I can't remember exactly where.
last, I think, or maybe second to last. So yeah, no, you're right. It's been quite the week. I mean, if you think about at least emotionally where we were last week, we logged off early because we were just tired. um, and so I think everybody got at least a moment to take a breath and think about their mental health and really focus on kind of where the world is in terms of what their concerns are, and now we can kind of move forward and start thinking about what the future looks like. And the best thing that I think we can do, because Alex, you and I we don't really know that much. We just pretend to. But we brought on somebody who actually knows things. And so we brought on John Kran, which John, I guess we've, let's see, the first time we met was, it feels like a million years ago, but we had lunch together
Mm-hmm.
and we started talking about policy a while ago.
Yep.
So
Yep.
John, the first time that I met John, I was giving a seminar in front of 150 people, and some guy in the back of the seminar yells out and corrects me about a fact.
Oh, yeah.
And so since then, everything's been going fine.
I think it was his first extension talk ever. And there's,
Oh no.
And John's like, "Excuse me, you moron."
I think I got nudged by somebody that said, correct him.
No, it
But
is super intimidating to talk to you, John, because I'm supposed to be the ag policy person here, but then whenever I talk to you, I just realize I don't know anything about anything. So I'm glad we're able to talk to you, the person that does know things about things today on ag policy.
well, I appreciate that. And I just like to say that you guys in your own particular fields have been such a tremendous resource to us as Farm Bureau staff too, because you understand the economics, you understand how to crunch the numbers and to put some meat behind what we're saying. So thank you for the partnership. We appreciate it.
well, I am kind of excited to see this kind of partnership develop, because I think at least in the last 5 years, AFRI has seen this big transition of faculty. And so, one thing that's I think been important on our end is trying to kind of redevelop this relationship
Mm-hmm.
with new faces. Um, so, with that, would you mind kind of explaining what your job is, what like where how you fit into Michigan Farm Bureau, kind of where you came from originally before you started at Michigan Farm Bureau and everything else?
Sure, absolutely. So in my role, I serve as the National Legislative Council, which is a fancy way of saying federal lobbyist for our farmer members. And so my primary job is to be their voice and to advocate on their behalf to our federal elected officials and the federal agencies and departments in Washington, which has grown a little bit different lately as of late with COVID, obviously with not being able to travel back and forth to Washington. I'm housed here in Michigan and work directly with our other Farm Bureau team members. Um, but I do have the privilege of flying back and forth to Washington in normal times for those meetings and develop relationships and advocate. But I've been in this role for, I guess, about 6 years. Prior to this, I spent some time working for a Michigan member of Congress, both in DC and in Michigan, and started my career at Michigan Farm Bureau working as a regional representative in the greater Grand Rapids area. Um, and before that, I was at Hope College. And before that, I grew up on a family
I
dairy
didn't know
farm
that.
in Michigan. So I did do a grad program kind of in the middle while working. Did the Purdue Indiana University MS MBA, Food Systems, Agribusiness Management. So um, I understand some of what you guys are saying when you talk economics. So it is a little bit helpful, but definitely don't have
The
the
acronym of that program is my favorite thing. It's like IUPUIEFSHRJKL.
There's a lot of I's and K's and U's.
A lot of acronyms. Yep.
So, well, yeah. I mean, how often do you think you're in DC, like talking to people?
On a normal year, I would say at least once a month, sometimes more.
Wow.
Usually a lot in the beginning of the year, and it tends to be less in the summer, but more again in the fall. But I have not been to DC since March when everything closed, and we had a group of about 120 farmers in town in the middle of March when everything got crazy. And I think we turned the lights off and locked the door on the way out of town. Everything closed as we were walking out of town. It was crazy.
Just overnight, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's
here we are.
Zoom calls and emails and phone calls in between.
And so I think, you've been in your role for like 6 years or so, I guess. And so you saw what the transition looked like 4 years ago. I guess the primary reason that we kind of have you on today is to kind of talk us through what this time's transition looks like. And maybe compare it a little bit to what's going on or what went on in the past when we started moving from administration to administration.
Sure. So I think it might be helpful to just kind of quickly list some of the things what we expect to see based on the election results, if that's helpful. So the House should be at about 225 Democrats, 210 Republicans. So that's a gain for the Republicans. Throwing that on top of a Senate majority for Republicans, that's probably going to be a little less than what they had this year. Leaves divided government, and that's something we face in Lansing, something we faced in the current makeup of Congress. But know that building consensus is not always the easy thing to do in divided government. And one of the first things for a new administration is going to be assuming that it goes as expected with Vice President Biden taking over as president in January. And one of the first things is going to be to build the cabinet and get some of those positions confirmed by a Senate. And if it's let's say 51-49 in Republicans' favor, that's where it could be. It doesn't take a whole lot of the senators to change that or challenge that. So that it could be a hurdle. And President Trump faced that in the beginning too. It took a lot of time to get a lot of the positions filled, even from when his own party was in control. So
wasn't that a choice for Trump though? I feel like that was a strategic. For previous presidents, that hasn't been as long of a kind of ordeal as it was for Trump. I thought that was sort of a by design story.
I think you're right. I think some of it was by design, but hopefully we can get things moving quickly so that there's some consistency and we've got people to meet with and talk to over at USDA and other agencies. It's you always hope that the person that fills the role is answering the phone and is there to talk to you and that it isn't vacant. So I think that a little bit of that happened last time.
So you ran through the numbers in the House and you said it was, what is it, 229, 210 now?
225 to 210 is where it should be. Currently it's 232 Democrats, 197 Republicans, 1 independent, and 5 vacancies. I wrote it down here. So.
And then the Senate, right now it's 49-48, and we've got 2 that are yet to fill. Is that right?
Current makeup is 53-45.
And then the election.
With the election results, it's 50 for Republicans, 48 for Democrats, and there's the 2 runoffs in Georgia.
Got it. Okay.
In January 5th. So there's a lot hinging on those 2 seats in Georgia. Both are held by Republicans today, but because of their election laws, you need to have 50% of the vote. And Senator Perdue just barely missed it, and the other senator, Senator Loeffler, was a little bit lower. But it's expected they could spend $1 billion between both parties fighting this out, just because so much of it hinges on it. If Republicans keep one, they control things. If they lose both of them and Democrats pick them up, obviously that's different. And it'll be 50-50, and Vice President Harris would be the tiebreaker. So technically, as president of the Senate, Democrats would control that.
Do you think? So you're talking about Biden's got to fill all these cabinet seats. Do you think that the makeup, the outcome of that Georgia election, could influence who he chooses for those cabinet positions?
I think so, because if you have to get it through on a slim majority, you're going to have to rely. The Democrats are going to have to find somebody that McConnell's comfortable bringing to the floor if he ends up being in control, and assuming you get all of your Democrats on board, which you probably won't, you're going to need a big chunk of the Republicans too. So probably someone that is more moderate leaning, that is supported by the constituents would be helpful. But who knows? I mean, they could take a different strategy too. You don't know.
Well, I guess one way that we might be able to at least see some future in the direction of ag policy is what happened in the Obama administration, right? Because I mean, Biden was obviously a part of that administration.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts on kind of what that looked like, and what that might be able to tell us for kind of this run?
So full disclosure, I wasn't in this role when Obama took office, and so I don't have a lot of background on particularly how that whole process worked. But knowing who some of the names that are being circulated now and who's been appointed to some of these transition teams are people that worked within the Obama administration in a lot of cases. In the case of the transition team for USDA, Robert Bonney is on the list, and he was a former undersecretary and advisor to Secretary Vilsack. So very familiar with how things work at USDA and part of that earlier team. And Michael Skuse served in the Obama administration. He's one of the people rumored to potentially be in the running for secretary. There's a number of other people. Tom Vilsack is former secretary for 8 years, is advising on the ag side, and he's been one of the point people for ag throughout the whole election. And so there's definitely some carryover. There'll probably be some new people too, though. I mean, we expect that.
So we've got a question which is a little bit of a change of pace, but Larry wants the nitty gritty here on kind of a controversial issue, which is, does John have the inside scoop on why NIFA, the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, and for my own interest, ERS, the Economic Research Service, got moved out of DC and to Kansas City, and then maybe what the potential of that moving back to DC?
Oh boy. Inside scoop. No, I don't. I mean, I think we probably all read the same
Sure.
articles on, on why that could have happened or not happened. But, clearly a lot of folks on the Democratic side have been critical of that move and that direction. So it's very possible that a Biden administration could reverse some of that, or bring some of those people back, or try to even hire some of those people back that left. But who knows? I don't know what kind of commitments they have with any rent or anything in Kansas City. So who knows? But I did hear
mostly a vacant office if they do have an office, right?
I did hear that the space that they were using in Washington, D.C. was some of the most expensive real estate.
Oh, really?
Was
Okay.
renting. So, that may have changed since, there's not a lot happening in Washington right now. And a lot of businesses are struggling to keep the lights on, let alone charge high rent. So
even with that move, I know off the top of my head a handful of people who were in the leadership roles for NIFA and ERS that did stay on in DC.
Okay.
But then I also know people who are on the lower end of the totem pole who ended up moving to Kansas City. And I think, whatever is going on, it's going to have to come up. They're going to have to come up with something that's a little bit more integrated. I'm sure we all read the same stuff about how, like, the research capacity is basically zero right now.
Well, what's the dude's name from Florida that they just hired?
Stefano.
Didn't they hire him to be in DC?
Yep, he's in DC.
So that's a pretty big signal, I think, in my mind of I guess where some priorities lie.
Yeah, but Brian Adam, who was also hired for one of these leadership roles, he's in Kansas City. So there's a distribution here that, like, I don't know if it's a hierarchical distribution where you put the leadership in DC, but you keep the lower tier people in Kansas City, but that doesn't feel very smart either.
It really doesn't. That's, I guess, kind of what the point if you got a supervisor that lives in a different city and time zone.
Time zone.
Yeah.
And you have
John?
so much like data, right? Like, I mean, we've got a project right now that we can't rerun our models because the data is kind of still in this weird transitionary phase, and also nobody can go in to run the analysis for us because the building doesn't really offer itself. So yeah, no, the USDA thing I think is going to be really interesting to follow. What are your thoughts, John?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I don't have the background on the NIFA side of things that you guys have, and I don't really know any of those folks that well, but yeah, definitely. I mean, I think part of it's just going to depend on how long things take with the transition and how long you fill some of the key spots at the top, and then what happens next.
But so I guess, John, that does kind of make a nice segue into maybe the meat of our conversation, which is what does a Biden presidency change in terms of priorities for agriculture, food policy?
Yeah, so sure. I mean, I think the big thing, the big focus is going to be on COVID and getting things under control there first and foremost. And for us, does it mean, is there a future need at all for any type of a response for farmers and production agriculture like we've seen so far? The markets have been looking better the last few weeks, so I think that's maybe not as big a concern as it had been, when CFAP came together, but there is some money allocated in the stimulus, should the stimulus ever get passed, for production agriculture again and for CCC. So, the way that had been written, it would give the secretary authority to spend that money on assistance for farmers, whatever it might be. But who knows when that falls, if it happens before the end of the year or after. But it seems like Republicans and Democrats continue to be divided on what that amount should be. Should it be 500 million? Should it be 3 billion? They got as close to 2, I think, but and we're fairly close, but
it's not even the amount, it's also the distribution mechanism, right? Like, and who receives it and for what. I think about, you pointed this out and I didn't know this, but Obama literally signed the farm bill at Michigan State University. And I think that's an interesting signal in and of itself, that there might be more interest in supporting like specialty crops than some of the row crop agriculture programs that we've seen. That's just speculation, but
yeah. Well, and I think it's worth mentioning that of the 4 people currently in leadership positions in the House and Senate Ag committees, only one will be returning. That's Senator Stabenow.
It's crazy.
And she's been there since 2000 in the Senate, and I think she's in her 4th term then, and she's chaired the Ag Committee. She's been ranking member on the Ag Committee, and she's worked with Vice President Biden when he was in the Senate, and I would expect that they are going to play an influential role in some of the policy direction, and even some of maybe the people that get selected for some of the positions within the agency. And her having a passion for Michigan and a knowledge for the industries here, I think that definitely goes in our favor as Michigan.
John, Mitch Galloway's got a real hardball question for you.
Oh no, tell him he can't ask questions.
Before we ask that one, I want to ask one of my own, which is some of the divide over those CFAP, what that stimulus payment's going to look like, I feel like was really part of the conversation of the election. And now that the election is over, does some of that divide settle, or do you foresee them being able to work together to get that sucker through now that the election's over, or does that divide between Republicans and Democrats remain?
Yeah, you've definitely taken a lot of the air of the election out of it, but at the same time, there's elements of the election are still ongoing, right? So, is there any potential political reasons why things couldn't be resolved? I think you've got tremendous pressure from the airline industry, from restaurants, from others. We know that the Small Business Administration programs worked really well, and we're able to hit a lot of sectors of the economy. There's people out there that need additional unemployment assistance and stimulus, and so these are all big pushes, I think, that will keep the conversation in the forefront. But I think it becomes a strategic move. Is it something that an outgoing president addresses? Is it something a new president addresses? Well,
it's Congress that's doing this sucker, right?
And but at the same time, most of the negotiation to date has been happening between Speaker Pelosi and Treasury Secretary Mnuchin. So on behalf of the administration, and the Senate's been, Republicans have been weighing in, with the White House. But if you've got a different White House, it could look very different. Republicans go from controlling two of those to one of those.
I just see, like, from the Democrats' point of view, it seems like they are hesitant to give Trump what looks like a win prior to the election. Well, Biden is the president-elect, and so
Yep.
giving a Trump some perceived win matters a whole lot less from my perspective than it did before the election.
You're right. And one of the arguments from Senate Republicans has been, let's give the money a chance to work in the economy. We've really gone into a lot of debt lately. Do we want to be spending another $1 trillion or $2 trillion on the backs of our children and grandchildren? So that argument becomes harder to make as Republicans have less control, right? So, maybe they're in a better position to try to get something done now with an outgoing president potentially, if what we expect it to be. But do you want to give a new president a clean slate, or do you want to have him have a fight on day one? So I think there's some of that yet too.
Sure, that makes sense. So let me go ahead and ask Mitch's hardball question, which is, stop messing around about CFAP, John. Mitch wants to know what's going to be the deal with the China Phase 1 trade agreement. Is this going to be reworked under the Biden administration? The rumor is, according to Mitch, that China wants this thing changed.
That's a good question, Mitch. I think that you'll see a lot of similarities with Trump's approach on trying to fight for the American worker, and protect American jobs, bring American jobs home, all that we've seen with Trump with the Biden administration. It's my sense is Biden would probably take a more of a multilateral approach with China, instead of a go it alone approach that we've seen. So it would take some time to maybe build some consensus there with some allies, but they've hit a lot of their benchmarks. China has, in terms of buying things. They're not meeting the expectations that we thought we were going to have at this point, but definitely the markets have rebounded, and some of those purchases have been made. I think my sense is that they've probably struggled with being able to read President Trump at times and where he's going with things and what he wants, but and that might change under Biden, but who knows? I mean, does some stability maybe give them a chance to come back to the table, or do they? I mean, because they're struggling too. So I guess I don't know that answer. Maybe one of our astute economists here would have a better perspective.
I mean, so I think the first thing is that, like, I think trade is not top of mind right now for a lot of the public policy conversations. We just have so many other crazy things going on that it's hard for me to believe that we're going to be moving on trade quickly. But the other side of that is that, well, Alex, you can disagree with that if you want, but the other side of it is that like Biden's whole thing for most of his career was his expertise in foreign policy. And so, yeah, I mean, he was also like a big part of that Senate Judiciary Committee for a long time and everything else. But like, if you go read, Biden memoirs, a lot of those books are him talking about all the stuff that he got excited about with foreign policy. And so, at least in my mind, Joe Biden's probably going to be somebody who's very interested in actually engaging with foreign authority figures in China or in other. Europe is a big one, obviously. Yeah. Like, it seems like the United States just keeps getting continuously pulled in, or United States agriculture is continuously pulled into more and more trade conflicts that they really don't want to be a part of in Europe. And I think those are conversations that are going to be much more easy to have with the new administration.
I think it's not as hard as you guys are saying. I mean, the root of a whole bunch of this stuff is those steel and aluminum tariffs, right? Those were a pretty big reversal of the Obama mantra of free trade, removing those steel and aluminum tariffs, I think would go a long way in terms of easing up the market, easing up those retaliatory tariffs kind of around the world. And it's something that Biden could do. John can correct me, but it seems like something Biden can do with the flick of a switch on day one.
Yeah, I think you're right. What's the reaction from the population if that were to happen though? I mean, do the steel workers get upset about that? I
I
mean, do
guess
the auto
Biden
workers?
loses Ohio.
Well, but on that note, though, I mean, if you go look at like polling data on U.S. beliefs on free trade, U.S. beliefs on free trade, from what I understand, are more positive now than they were before Trump took office. And I think a lot of that is probably retaliatory, right? Where you had like a lot of the left wing side of the United States was anti-trade, and then the Trump administration kind of took that as a banner, and you hate everything about the other team in this negative partisan world. So maybe that's what it is, and maybe that'll change as soon as the presidency changes hands. But I don't know. I mean, I'm obviously, as an economist, you almost are preconditioned to be very pro-trade.
Yeah, fair enough. I am very opinionated and biased, I guess, in this direction of free trade.
Yeah, I mean, you think about like the disruption of supply chains that was already happening before the COVID hit, and now you think about like we can't even drive across the bridge to Canada through Detroit right now. So like it's hard for me to understand how these international supply chains are just going to heal before COVID really is solved. John, you're giving us this look like we're idiots.
It's slightly a look of hatred too. John's like, I am so glad or mad that I chose to come on here.
What do you think?
Outside of what you already said and what we said,
okay.
I don't know. It's I mean, I think big picture, I don't think a Biden administration is going to be trying to start any new, bilateral trade agreements off the bat. I think they're going to focus on what we have. They're going to probably look more at the WTO and that stalemate that's been happening there. These already publicly said they're going to get back in the Paris Climate Accord and what that could look like. I mean, I think that the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that I think that ship probably sailed. And the Biden was a big part of that as part of the Obama administration that was negotiated. But the world's different now, and parties have changed on that issue too. Both parties. So
are we even still invited?
I don't know.
To the TPP party?
I think there's some within the group that would like the U.S. to be in it for sure, but I don't know.
Maybe one thing that we could look at for what to expect there is the transition team on the USDA side that Biden's tapped. I think that list got released earlier this week, right?
Yes. I think I have it up here somewhere.
Well, you have one of the books.
700 tabs.
Yeah. Office of the U.S. Trade Representative. The lead here is Jason Miller. It just says self-employed. I'm not familiar with him. Kathleen Clausen of the University of Miami. Ted Dean of Dropbox. Celeste Drake of Directors Guild of America. Michael DuBois of Values Partnership. Julie Green, AFL-CIO. Elizabeth Kelly, Urban Institute. And there's a few more here, but I don't know these names, and so I really don't know what they bring to the table. But
isn't Trey just trying to set you up to hold up your book?
To talk about that.
That's right there next to you.
The Fault Lines of Foreign Policy?
Yeah, that's the one. You pulled the Trey, man.
Yes, there we go. So in my hands, I hold the Fault Lines of Foreign Policy, a legislative and political history of the Farm Bill. Pretty wonky, but interesting point here is the author, Jonathan Koppes of the University of Illinois, Farm Doc, former administrator of the Farm Service Agency under President Obama, and former staff member of Senate Ag Committee, is part of the transition team. And so clearly he has worked at USDA, knows the ins and outs of farm policy as he wrote the book. and someone that we know in a lot of our circles, both you guys in the academic side and us as Farm Bureau. We've had him speak at events before and have gone to him for questions on things and advice. But that was one of the names that definitely rose up as someone we knew and had experience working with.
So one question I have about that is that Jonathan Coppice has been extremely critical of the market facilitation payments. And when we look at the trend of ad hoc payments over time, all of a sudden, the last couple of years, they've been through the roof. Um, do you, I mean, I guess this is related to the trade question, but where do you see kind of the size and the ad hocness of government payments in the future?
Well, clearly the farm sector has needed help both from a trade perspective when the tariffs came into place, and then later on with COVID with the CFAP programs, and they've been needed and very much appreciated by the ag community as a whole. The programs were rolled out relatively quickly. What was different is they came directly from USDA and they didn't go through kind of congressional oversight like you would see with other farm programs. And so there's been scrutiny all along of how things could be different, how things could be better. Um, I think we definitely saw some improvements for how Michigan was impacted as the programs went on. If you look at the current numbers, more has come to Michigan and more to our specialty crop sectors than we'd seen previously, which has been, I think, been very much appreciated by our farmers.
Yeah.
But the concern all along has been, how does this apply to the next farm bill? What does this mean from the fight of trying to keep farm payments and crop insurance and all these things viable when we've tried to move away from ad hoc and disaster type things. And so it's definitely raises the question of what is the debate going to look like. And I think we'll know in the next few years as we start writing the next farm bill if these are hindrances or not. But I think we all know that they've helped the farming community out tremendously. And so where to be today without them, I don't know. The farm bill programs alone would not have been enough.
Right. The article that really sticks in my head is actually, I think, that Coppice and Carl Zuloff wrote together about ad hoc payments being like an early indicator of significant changes in farm bill policy. And I think that's exactly what we're looking at. I don't know what the next farm bill is going to look like, but I get the feeling it's not going to look like the last one.
Yeah.
And especially with somebody like Jonathan Coppice on kind of trying to lead some of that transition. I mean, all you have to do is go kind of search his name on FarmDoc, and you can read article after article in that Gardner Farm Policy content that basically signals that, there's something a little bit, wonky or higher minded about the way he's thinking than just like the nuts and bolts day-to-day standard operating procedures of crop insurance policy, for example.
Yep. Well, I mean, it's been 50 billion, I think, so far that has come through, I think, through CFAP and some of the disaster programs here just in the past year and a half, right? I mean, it's been a significant amount of money that was not authorized under a farm bill. And granted, a lot of it was approved by Congress, but it didn't really have a lot of direction on top of it. The USDA had a lot of discretion on how that money was spent and allocated.
Sure.
For sure.
But okay, so it's one thing to say Jonathan Coppice is against market facilitation payments, and he thinks they're an indicator of change, future changes in the farm bill. He's an important guy in this transition team, but he's not the Secretary of Ag, right?
Right.
And the farm bill is a thing that has looked pretty similar for the last a whole bunch of years. Do you have an idea, John, of whether this thing's going to undergo major changes? And if it does, what the heck that would look like?
No, I think it's too early to tell.
Okay.
The farm bill's through 2023. Crop insurance has had a good history of being a workable program for the ag sector. There's been a push to move more to that type of a program versus direct payments. ARC PLC are kind of in between, I guess, but that seems to have been working up until some of these major things. And in the case of the tariffs, that was mainly brought about because of actions by the administration, right? I mean, it was a policy decision based on that, and COVID was not something that the farmers brought on or the government brought on. It was just circumstance. So I think we can't anticipate we're going to have these types of major disruptors every year or every farm bill. I mean, hopefully
I
we don't,
freaking hope not,
but
John.
God.
I don't know how you even budget for these kind of things, because they're
True.
way above and beyond the normal scope of spending, and you get through them, and then you hopefully put good tools in place that help you get through the rough times. But the times are a little rougher now than they've been before. So um, hopefully those other tools, traditional type tools, work better in most years.
Well, one thing about that is it's not just the administration, right, that matters. What matters is the House and the Senate.
Yeah.
And as you pointed out, there's only one returning player who's kind of been around for a long time. So, you know, do you have any thoughts on kind of that direction for those folks?
Sure. So just basically running through it, you know, we've Chairman former Chairman, Ranking Member Mike Conaway in the House retired. He announced his retirement early on, so that was not a big surprise. Same with Pat Roberts in the Senate. But the big surprise was Colin Peterson losing his election. I think a lot of people knew he was in trouble, but you know, he's been a strong supporter of agriculture and a lot of Midwest type issues for a very long time, and those are big shoes to fill. And so probably the front runner there is David Scott from Georgia, who's the next highest ranking Democrat on the committee. He's the likely one, but Jim Costa from California is also made it publicly known he wants the position, and so it'll probably be down to those two. You know, I think you know, Georgia has some similarities to Michigan in terms of some of our specialty crop side of things.
Sure.
California obviously as well from their diversity, and both have been on the committee a while, so they have some expertise there. But I think we just have to come wait and see. On the Republican side in the House, you
Well,
know,
but between those two people, I mean, my understanding is that if you're polling somebody from Georgia, you're going to have very different farm policy than if you're
Yeah.
looking at somebody from California. You know, and frankly, I don't really like California, so
How so? What do you mean by that, though, Trey? Not what do you mean by you don't like California, but how do you mean that the farm
overrated. That's
policy
what
would
that
look
means. Um,
differently if it's somebody from Georgia running it than California?
Well, my understanding is that, you know, if we're talking about the candidate from Georgia, we're talking about a lot more traditional farm policy that we would expect, you know, from a production ag state that looks like a southern production ag state. Where California, I mean, we all know that California is a whole different beast when it comes to agricultural production, and so those, at least the priorities for those two places, or at least those two constituent groups, are probably going to be different. I mean, I don't have any specifics that I can really point toward, but you know, from what I've read, that's kind of where it's at. Is like, oh, there's going to be some differences.
I think you raised a good point on the geographical differences, and you know, you typically have a makeup of North and South and in certain areas on the Ag Committee and the principals anyway. And you know, with Senator Stabenow being from Michigan, the likely chair in the Senate is going to be Bozeman from Arkansas. That's a southern state. If you pull in Georgia, for example, what does that leave then for the Republican lead in the House? Probably G.T. Thompson from Pennsylvania. So you've got some mix there. I guess if Costa were to get it instead of Scott, then maybe you would see someone else like Austin Scott from Georgia is also in the running. And well, there's another name too. Rick Crawford from Arkansas, but I doubt you'd have two people from Arkansas or two people from Georgia in those four principal positions.
So Mitch points out, Mitch wants to weigh in on the California versus Georgia, and Mitch says, aren't there more regulations for California farmers when compared to Michigan farmers?
I would expect that just based on some of the politics in California, yeah. But you know, from a national perspective, it should be fairly uniform. It's just if the state has gone above and beyond with regulation, then yeah.
That's
I would
mostly
expect
LA
that,
and
yeah.
San Francisco, though, right? Driving farm policy rather
Right.
than a senator.
Right.
So, but on this regulatory piece, one thing that is always stuck out to me, and I talk about it probably too much even, is that it's not. Yeah, I talk about a lot of things too much, but this is one that always sticks to me is that it's not just about the written regulation; it's about the enforcement of that regulation. So like when you think about so one that people talk about a lot right now is dicamba. It's not just about what the EPA says or what the USDA says about the availability or usability of dicamba and the rules associated with it. It's the question of who's actually going out on farm and checking to see if those regulations are being followed. If folks are going off label, then unless there is some type of enforcement mechanism, it doesn't really matter whether or not Michigan and California have different laws. So it's not clear to me that you have such diverse enforcement mechanisms that it creates that massive gap between states.
One of the things that may have been on Mitch's mind, not to put words in his mouth, but there's this
all the words in his mouth.
there's a conversation happening about the move to electric vehicles in California, I think over the next 10,
Sure.
15 years. And so that might be what he was referring to, and what that could mean. I mean, clearly there's concern from farmers, especially those that are raising corn for ethanol, that could happen, right? And that's and what that could mean for farm equipment and trucking, all these other things that we rely on. And if California does it, does that mean the rest of the country has to follow suit just because of economics and because what the car companies are making and et cetera? So maybe that's what he was referring to. And I think that's definitely top of people's mind right now as well.
It certainly wouldn't be the first time that California has enforced state politics on other countries. So just Trey to point out, an anonymous attendee just said, you said who does enforcement, and an anonymous attendee just said MDARD investigates those complaints. So there is a mechanism to do that investigation.
I mean, I'm not saying that there is no enforcement. I'm just saying that the enforcement has some heterogeneity. The example that I throw out a lot is hemp enforcement. There's a lot of variation in what was and wasn't allowed and what people understood to be allowed, et cetera. MDARD does the enforcement on hemp as well here in Michigan. But then you have this interstate commerce question about what you can or can't ship across state lines and what those other states are going to do once the hemp crosses. The THC testing was all over the place. I think there's a really interesting conversation to be had about what not only the regulations say, but also what the enforcement of those regulations lead toward. We've actually got a paper on the Endangered Species Act and what happens to beef cattle production in the Midwest when you add more and more species onto the Endangered Species Act. And what you find is actually beef cattle production, if anything, increases due to additions in endangered species, because it's not clear what the enforcement mechanism is on farm for people when they see one of these endangered species. So there's an incentive for you to actually overproduce in some cases. I don't know. That's one of those things I talk about a lot.
So I think that rant sets us up nicely. The hemp conversation, the regulatory conversation, sets us up nicely to know, since we've got John here, to know what Farm Bureau is thinking. So what are both American Farm Bureau and Michigan Farm Bureau, what are y'all's priorities going forward?
So in full disclosure, our through our member policy development process and our board of directors, typically on the federal side, the priorities get set in December after the board meets and actually just before the annual meeting. So the annual meeting's in January, so it really happens after that. But I would expect a lot of our priorities from this year to be very similar going forward. And you think about immigration reform and making sure we've got access to workers, that the systems we have for the visa program are streamlined and easy to use and not ripe with additional regulation, that paperwork, etc. Trade, making sure we continue to open up new markets and find new opportunities for farmers. Infrastructure is always a big one. Regulatory reform is always a big one. Broadband is very important, obviously, and I think we've learned that now more than ever with COVID and people working from home and kids going to school from home. I mean, it's clear we need broadband everywhere. We need high-speed internet everywhere, and I think those are things we'll continue to push on. I think building relationships with the new administration too. It's assuming that it changes. We'll be focused on that as well. So
John, can you talk a little bit about that? Because you were saying some interesting things about the access and relationship y'all have had with the current administration. I wonder if you could just contrast that with what you expect. What's been good about your relationship with this administration, and what you expect or hope to see in terms of your relationship with a new
Sure,
administration?
sure. So, and just speaking on our relationship today, if you look specifically, I mean, President Trump has been to three in a row American Farm Bureau annual meetings to address our members. That's huge. No other president has done that. I think the last president to come prior to that was George W. Bush. I think came once during his presidency. So that shows a lot right there that the industry that the administration wants to work with the industry.
Hold on, that's pretty significant. I think what you just said is that um, both presidents on either side of the Obama administration, but not the Obama administration, came to speak to the American Farm Bureau. Is
Not
that what you
not
said?
President Obama himself. No.
Okay.
I'm sure we had Secretary Vilsack and others, maybe trade representative others at different times, but the president himself did not come and address the delegates. So that's pretty significant. We've had Vice President Pence at one of our statewide meetings. We've had Secretary Perdue and others from USDA in Michigan multiple times, even multiple times this summer
I think
and
Sonny
fall.
Perdue lives here, as far
Yeah,
as I can tell. He's just always here.
he's been here a lot, so it's been good to showcase Michigan agriculture. And so, and on top of that, it's when we take members to Washington, when we could take members to Washington, um, it was very easy to set up a meeting with USDA and get undersecretaries and other people in the meetings to, we took a big group to the White House and met in the old executive building, leading up to, the when I mentioned we were there just ahead of when COVID got crazy. So that kind of access has been really nice, and I know we've got people that we've developed relationships with over years that are in key positions, and it's been helpful to share our message and advocate for our members. But it's now as there's a transition, there's an opportunity to build new relationships, and we've already seen some names surface like Jonathan Coppice that we know that'll be helpful. And American Farm Bureau, you probably saw it, put out a statement over the weekend and congratulated Vice President or President-elect Biden on the victory, and we look forward to working with them moving forward. And I think looking at the Farm Bill as an example, so many of our issues don't fall on party lines. You take an issue like the Farm Bill, it's about both parties working together. When they've tried to do it alone, it doesn't work. And there's other issues like broadband, um, and some of the infrastructure things that really don't necessarily fall on party lines either. Um, and so, yeah, we were looking forward to working with whoever's in office, and our issues are
Well,
important
so
to
I
a broader
think a couple
audience.
things. So the first thing is I think ag is pretty nonpartisan,
Right.
in the sense that people are willing to support ag regardless of what political party they generally identify with. But the other thing is you used the word a couple times, relationships, and I mean you as Farm Bureau had a very strong relationship with the Trump administration. Um,
Mhm.
I think it'll be interesting to see how strong that relationship is with this next administration, because if it's true the old cliche that all politics are local, then these folks need to be coming to talk to you in order to develop those local relationships.
Well, and I think just one example, you know, former Secretary Tom Vilsack is a major player in these conversations. He's really a key advisor for um, President-elect Biden on agriculture, and he's not in the running, I don't think, to be the secretary again, but he's he is part of those conversations, and we have a relationship there. He's been to our office in Lansing when we were working on USMCA in his current role. So it's helpful to know some of those people and have those relationships already, so you hit the ground running. But there's new people to meet, and there'll be faces we haven't worked with before, maybe faces we've been on opposite side of issues with before. But we have an opportunity to come together, talk about what's important to us and what's important to our members, and carry the message forward. And it's an exciting time.
I just want to play my wet blanket role, which is you both said everybody can get around agriculture and we all hug and we hold hands and we run across wheat fields. I'm not sure I buy that.
Running across wheat fields isn't that easy, but
Actually, yeah. Anyway, yeah, so you're right. The Farm Bill gets passed in a bipartisan way, but there's a big dang reason for that, which is that the brunt of the money for the Farm Bill is urban interest. It's food stamps. And I think we've had some discussions about maybe at some point those two things get divorced. And when those two things, if they were to get divorced, it becomes all of a sudden a lot harder to pass that money for the Farm Bill because as much as we want to hold hands and say that everybody loves agriculture, when it comes time to a fixed budget, people from Manhattan, New York are going to be a lot more hesitant to be paying people in Manhattan, Kansas, than they are to be using money that benefits more direct interests for them.
There's no question that Farm Bill coalition is much more than just Republicans and Democrats. It's you hit on the nutrition side. It's also energy. It's also conservation. Um, there's a host of other groups that are critical to getting that accomplished. And, I think that's been one of our strengths is coalition building on issues like that. And maybe there'll be opportunities with other issues moving forward. But a lot of it is relationships. Not everyone understands the needs of the rural community and the farmer in particular. It's if you're representing a solely urban district, you're going to look at those interests first naturally. That's what's expected. So, but maybe there is some room for common ground. You find those things and you work toward those, and hopefully you get where you need to go.
And so Larry has a point there that yeah, that's this kind of strategic partnerships, making sure all parties get paid that are mutually beneficial is nothing new, right? This is
right.
Something that's been going on. The political log rolling is something that's been going on since the founding of our country.
That's how our process works or should work.
But I will say it's a really good point that, if you think about like what's been going on with SNAP over the last 4 years, there are a lot of people that are pretty upset with where SNAP is right now. And so, I don't know how much retaliation you might expect, but, it is touchy to start going after SNAP when that's been an important relationship between, the food stamp / SNAP program for so long in farm policy. That if you start messing with one side of it, you're risking another side when the power dynamic shifts. So I think it's a good point that like going after SNAP might not have been the best strategic move for long-term agricultural support.
You mean say that again?
So SNAP has been under
just the last sentence, yeah.
So I think that it might not have been the best strategic move to go after SNAP as hard as SNAP was.
Meaning attack.
Well, change SNAP and reduce SNAP benefits to hundreds of thousands of people.
So you mean the actions, the executive actions of the administration on SNAP? Okay, and that's been one of the things. Actually, that's a good point. The Congresswoman Marcia Fudge from Ohio, who's has expressed interest in being the next Secretary of Agriculture. She's been on the short list. She has made, I think, that one of her priorities to go after and roll back some of those, or reinstate some of those things that the Trump administration rolled back on SNAP.
Which I guess we haven't really highlighted that much who these kind of candidates might be for the Secretary.
Did we not talk about that? We've talked about it amongst the three of us like 4 times.
I know, right?
Go for it, John.
Sure. So, I mentioned Marcia Fudge from Ohio. She's high on the list. Heidi Heitkamp from North Dakota served in the Senate, served on the Ag Committee.
Let's do this piece by piece. So tell us about Marcia Fudge.
Marcia Fudge from Ohio. She currently chairs the House Subcommittee on Nutrition Oversight and Department Operations. She has a very, very urban district, so it's expected she would probably take more of a SNAP urban type of an approach versus production agriculture. But she's served on the committee for a number of years. She's, I think, third highest ranking Democrat that'll be returning, and so she clearly has been around the issues for a long time and has some experience there, but not as clear on where she'll be on some of the farm policy side of things. Heidi Heitkamp from North Dakota served on the Senate Ag Committee for a number of years. She has been working more recently with former Senator Joe Donnelly from Indiana. They started what's called the One Country Project, and it's been a group to kind of help Democrats connect with rural voters. And so that's her focus. And so representing the whole state of North Dakota is very different than maybe a congressional district in Ohio. So, likely has some more experience with production agriculture as a whole. She is being supported by Tom Vilsack, so that's an interesting fact.
Okay.
Sherry
What do you mean by supported by Tom Vilsack?
He's pushing for her.
Okay, cool.
He's pushing for her, but I think we're hearing fudge a little bit more. And then there's the question of, does someone like Colin Peterson, who knows ag very well and was defeated, does he get asked to come in? I mentioned Michael Skuse earlier from Delaware. He's currently the ag chair or the ag secretary in Delaware. He worked in the Obama administration at USDA. He's on that list of people. Sherry Bustos from Illinois, Congresswoman. She had a tough reelection, so she won, but she part of her role was the campaign side of House Democrats, so she's getting scrutinized right now for some of the losses they sustained in the election. So she may not be on that list, but she's another name that's been surfaced.
Sounds like a pretty long list of women on that list. I don't know the answer to this, but could this be the first female Secretary of Ag?
I know we've had at least one other female Secretary
Really?
of Agriculture, Ann Veneman, a few years back. I think that was the Bush administration, if I'm correct. But I need to read my farm policy book by Coppice. I would know. But if Fudge were to get it, she would be the first African American Secretary of Agriculture, which is, pretty significant too.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, it's a lot of moving parts, and obviously, we know more this week than we did last week, but obviously there are still a lot of things that we don't know yet. One thing that I kind of keep thinking about a lot is restaurant policy. It doesn't really look like we're going to be able to find much common ground to develop some type of stimulus package in the near term. And winter is coming quickly. And actually, there are restaurants in Lansing and bars in Lansing that the bars I'm more familiar with. But they've decided to just close for the winter and retry when there's some promising other side, and maybe when they can actually do outdoor dining again. But I think that side from a demand perspective is going to be huge. From an institutional buyer perspective, I think we're going to lose a lot of institutional buyers for agricultural products in the United States, which doesn't bode well for prices, right, unless we're talking about trade policy. So I don't know.
And we've clearly seen a lot of supply chain disruption to this point. And what does it look like then if you take out some of those key long-term sustainable buyers? You talked about Lansing, but Washington, D.C. is another example. You think about all the people that would normally travel there just for vacation or for advocacy reasons, whatever. We've heard already a lot of places that we're familiar with that have closed shop already there. And maybe you're dealing with a little bit more expensive real estate, but either way, if you don't have people coming in the door or even flying there for that matter, what does that mean? And so I think the need to help out the restaurant sector, the airlines, those will continue to be in the forefront in these stimulus conversations. And I think something will happen eventually. The question is like, how much will it be? They got pretty close. I think they got within $1 billion in the negotiations ahead of the election, but $1 trillion, sorry. But
we need to bet one of those deep dish Pizza House pizzas.
Yes.
On whether you think this will happen before or after January 20th.
If it's going to happen this year, it'll happen like the last 1 or 2 session days before Christmas, because that's usually when things happen.
I think it will, man.
But
I think it'll happen.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a likelihood that could happen, but I guess it just depends on what the politics look like.
Then we don't get to bet a deep dish pizza if you agree with me.
Well,
if you agree with Alex, I'll take the other side of it because I don't think it's going to happen. So I take that bet, but if you guys are betting against me, then you owe me 2 pizzas.
False.
And I promise you I can eat both.
That's not how life works.
Yeah, I think I guess I'm watching what happens with the transition and any legal cases out there that the president would be involved with, and how that all happens in the media and publicly, and I also wonder what happens with Georgia and those 2 open seats, and because I think those 2 factors could have a lot of impact on if a stimulus gets done. But Congress is only funded through the December 11th, so they need to get something done. This week we saw some action in the Senate on some appropriations bills. So the plan would be that they do an omnibus, not a continuing resolution, but an omnibus where they take the individual appropriation bills from each chamber, kind of marry up the different, marry them up, find, sort out the differences, and pass them as bigger chunks. And what we're hearing is that's going to happen through the end of the fiscal year. So if you could start the next year with not having to worry about that, you could maybe have some time to focus on some other things. But there's been a rumor around too that maybe an omnibus and a stimulus could be hooked together somehow too. I don't know. That maybe makes it easier to vote for some people because there's multiple reasons.
I can feel a deep dish coming my way.
Hopefully they're open then.
Right.
Fair enough.
Yeah, maybe we might have to do takeout. We might have to do takeout.
Yeah.
Eat in our cars.
Oh God. I don't know. I think, we'll see what happens, but I think that there is something promising to see that, in the long term, the rhetoric so far has been to try to treat the United States as kind of a all-encompassing United States, and that the partisan rhetoric, at least right now, is starting to ramp down to some extent. So at least hopefully there might be some more kind of across the aisle reaching that I don't know. I think some people were concerned we weren't going to see. So,
and I think that's a good point. There's been some chatter too in the news about a Biden administration maybe having a few Republicans in some of the cabinet positions, and I don't know that we know which ones that would be, and I don't think it would be necessarily unique to this administration. We've seen that happen in the past, but that might be a way to help bridge some of that as well.
I don't know if it's about the Republican thing though. I almost think it's more urban rural. I think somebody that's actually plugged into rural America is what people are looking for more than even just the Republican piece. Because if you bring in like a Kasich type, I don't think that you're really capturing what people were concerned about. It wasn't necessarily the letter behind their name, but it was the idea that they would show up to Farm Bureau meetings, or that they would, be at the FFA meetings, or whatever it is. And so I really hope that that's what we see, is people reaching not only across the aisle, but across the zip code.
Fields of wheat, running through fields of wheat.
Yeah. That's my hope. Alex doesn't think that's going to happen, but
no.
I'll hold
well, and frankly, like if they want to get anything done, you've got a narrower majority for Democrats in the House and a narrow majority, most likely, for Republicans in the Senate. They're going to have to reach across the aisle if they're going to accomplish major things. I mean, as of right now in the Senate, they need 60 votes to move anything to get past the filibuster. But I guess that could change with rules. But
Sure.
And the House is actually looking at unrelated topic, but looking at this, this virtual type voting platform stuff. Potentially, I don't know where that's going, but that conversation's happening. At least some of the stuff I've read. So we might see some changes there, but I don't know about process rules. But my point is if you want to get anything accomplished, you're going to need to build consensus, because chances are you're going to lose one or two within your ranks on either side.
Yeah.
That are maybe more on the fringes of things. So
I think we should end it there, guys.
Yep. Well,
John,
thanks, John,
you're so awesome to talk to, that so much more than Trey and I combined. Thanks so much for coming on and just helping us learn about what the future might look like. I really appreciate that deep dish pizza that's coming my way. I look forward to talking in person.
Yes.
Hopefully someday soonish, if that vaccine can come.
Super excited for when we can start doing our lunches again.
Yes. Yes, me too.
So
thank you for the opportunity. This has been fun. It's a little bit longer than I'm used to, but we seem to fill the time really well, and we had things on the list to talk about we never got to. So
that's true.
There'll be more for when we have that pizza together.
Perfect.
Yeah. And thanks, Megan, for your support.
Happy to help.
All right, bye guys.
Take care.
All right, bye.